In the clash of the three German premium manufacturers, Audi, BMW and Mercedes, Mercedes is clearly leading in global sales at the moment. Now Audi wants to fight back with the all-new generation of the Audi A6, the big luxury sedan. Can it be best in segment? That was the question you've asked me. And we will of course experience that together. For the exterior, which is the unique setting for this vehicle, how is it different to the A7 and the A8? Interior, what have they done there, also technology-wise, infotainment-wise, if you compare it to the competitors, also with a night driving special there, and of course the driving experience, how does it master the compromise between sportiness and luxury? On Autogefuehl, your #1 resource for in-depth car reviews and your #1 community to discuss cars, with Thomas in Full HD, full screen and full length. Let's go! In the front we can see an evolution of the design, so it's not super different than the predecessor version, and it also has similarities with the A7 and the A8. Overall the A7 has this rather sporty approach, the A8 the very classic one with the luxury orientation, and this one here is somewhat in between. It is also the S-Line we have here today for you with a black single frame grille, really large. We have those sensors here in the front where they can still keep the 3D Audi logo. I like that because sometimes those logos are replaced nowadays, have 2D logos, sensor behind that. Here they have the sensor on the side. Overall 38 assistance systems available overall. We will talk about them very soon. Also in the lower part, a stronger bumper with the S-Line. Those headlights come standard with LED, however those ones here are the optional matrix LED light with spectacular functions, and we did caught some night shots this time, so very soon in a special clip we'll also show you how it was driving at night, and with a pretty spectacular effect, I can tell you. 4,93 meters or 16'2" is the total length of the all-new Audi A6, so the exterior dimensions haven't really changed that much. The rim style starts with 17-inch, optional 21-inch maximum. Those ones here, 20-inch. So yeah, they're already quite huge. They are okay in the riding comfort, I can already tell you right now. Soon more to that in the driving part. S-Line badge right there, also with the sportier bumper then. The color, by the way, what would you say? Is it white or is it gray? It is called Suzuka Gray, but it's somehow also white, depending also on the camera shot. It's something in between. Then the very classic sedan shape. You know this will also be available as an A6 Estate, or Avant as we say in Germany, when you want to have, you know, more versatility. Then what is Audi doing design wise? You can see here a dropping line on the height of the door handle, dividing in light and shadow. And it's been picked up here by a second design line to form a little stronger shoulder. Overall they use sharp design lines, whereas Mercedes more goes for those round central lines. This is definitely a matter of taste. Do you like this one more than the E-Class? Tell me in the comments. And to the rear here again, more sharper design lines leading up to those taillights. And let me tell you something about suspensions already right here, because it always fits to the side profile here. We have 4 different suspensions. Base sport suspension, 20 millimeters lower, adaptive sport suspension, and the air suspension, which is top trim and also built in this very vehicle. It is worth the extra price if you have the money. Otherwise, the base trim will also do just fine if you want to more go for a fleet budget solution. And now to the rear part here. Is a design that is very horizontally oriented with those new taillights that stress the width of the vehicle. 55, by the way, is the badge here for the 3-liter engine, and they have this nomenclature which I do not agree with, because 55 is telling me nothing basically about the vehicle. It's just a fantasy figure, but they have this, this strategy that they have basically a stair strategy, and then different horsepower figures stand for different numbers, and again, they don't make any sense. In the lower part, they have this fake exhaust design, and this is just, they could just also have saved that. It also looks a little bit strange in the S-Line. If you drive behind the car and have those layers here, it looks really squarish, a little bit, like a hovercraft or something like that. So I think a very evolutionary design, but in the rear they actually played around a little bit. And also interesting, if you compare the A7 and the A8, this one here, the A6, goes really straight, whereas the A8 goes a little bit inward like this in the yard design or boat design, and the A7 goes a little bit like this from a more sporty approach. Engines. This one here is the 3-liter TFSI turbo petrol engine with 340 horsepower. The overdrive distribution is always 40% in the front and 60% in the rear. This is the basic distribution. Then it can vary a little bit depending on the situations. This one will be the main petrol engine. All of the petrol engines will soon also be equipped then with those particle filters. And the same goes for the TDIs, of course, for the diesel side. You start with a 2-liter TDI. This one then has front-wheel drive and only a 12-volt board net. All others, the V60 for the petrol and also the 3-liter TDIs, they come with a 48-volt board net, so more electrification, mild hybrid system that you can use this sailing or coasting function to save some fuel, and that of course also all the assistance systems can be powered. And about the horsepower figures then for the diesels, the 2-liter TDI will be with about 200 horsepower and the 3-liter TDI with 231 or 286 horsepower. And the last one, the 286 horsepower, will be the only one coming with a converter automatic gearbox, all the other with the S-tronic dual clutch transmission. One short preview of night driving before we start with the really driving part, because this is really so fancy, so cool. Look at how this car looks like when you drive it at night. Very well done with the illumination, with the ambient light. You can pick a lot of different colors for that as well. Then we have, for example, also the head-up display, which you can very well see at night. It can display different information, also those arrows, for example, where you have to go in the route. And also very spectacular, the night vision feature, again an option that might be useful when you're really living somewhere where you don't have any exterior lighting available and you're driving a lot of time at night. And my favorite feature is definitely those those matrix LED headlights. This car always comes with LED, but matrix LED with the high beam function, this is then optional, and you can see the spectacular effect when you're somewhere driving with light, or maybe there's a car in front of you, then this spot is left out. So not all of those single LEDs are being activated, but then when you come to a darker area, bam, here it is, and then it widens the light view, and you really think you are in a spaceship, and everything is getting bright again. So overall the system tries to prevent anyone from getting blinded, but you should have the optimum view. And I have to say, I think I hardly ever had a nighttime ride where I could see so much. So, when you're living in a crowded area where also motorways may be illuminated and you're not driving so many times at night, save the money, stick with the standard LED. But if you're really a nighttime driver, that often happens to you, or maybe in a Nordic country where it's often pretty dark, then those matrix LED lights will really help you. Also, one of the technology highlights here for sure. This is the vehicle key. I think it also has a premium approach, but you can also use the keyless entry function. Just put your hand right here to close the vehicle or put it inside the door handles to open it. And this one here is also equipped with the optional soft close. Magic, but you have to pay for it extra. Then inside here, extreme clean design, great build quality here with brushed aluminum style. You can also have just a black style here, for example, so different choices. Alcantara at the inside of the doors, then galvanized buttons with a clicking sound. Click, click. So that's always fun. Every single button. Not so much room here for bigger bottles, just small bottles right there. Then the main part of the interior. At the moment you can see all the infotainment system monitors are shut off. I will soon show you how they look like turned on, but here in this way you can see how it's, you know, in the most clean surrounding with the S-Line package also inside. Flat bottom of the steering wheel is a very sporty approach. Single frame grille is mirrored on the inside of the steering wheel. I like when interior details are picked up basically then from exterior ones. And those seats, it's the same then with the suspensions here with the seats, because you have 4 different types. Base seats, sports seats, Sports Plus seats, and both Sports and Sports Plus are available here with this Alcantara frequency, it's called. On the outside they partly use leather red, partly real leather, but it's already a step forward in the higher trims. And then the optional one is a multi-contour seat. I showed you that in a static setup, so 4 seats available. And with those sport seats you're really fine off because you have more shoulder support right here, and they are also available then with Alcantara. But you can also go with base seats just with fabric, at least in Germany. Sitting inside, it is very spacious, and that's also a difference, for example, to the A7, which we have also tested. The A7 is a little bit flatter, especially here in the A pillar, and this one here gives you more headroom, especially if you don't have the panoramic roof equipped. You have plenty of headroom, although I'm 1.86 m or 6'1". You can also adjust the steering wheel in, wow, it's like I think I've never seen a steering wheel where you can adjust it really in this distance. Is really interesting. Those seats here, they have a manual control. You can put the front part of the seat a little bit higher if you like. You can make it a little bit longer. You can pump it up, y'all. I guess they've put the manual seat here that I can pump it up, y'all, for you, just, you know. And then this control knob to control the rear part of the seat, which is really hard to control, and you're always damaging your watches. So I don't like this system. I think for a car of this price, every single seat from the base model should have the electric control. On the one hand, I'm fine when nothing is really, you know, not everything is electronically controlled, but seat-wise, it's also a safety feature when you're, for example, driving and think, oh, I need, you know, to change the angle in the rear, and then you just blip, blip, and then it's done. So I think it's really easier than the manual control here. Other than that, you have this typical luxury sedan seating position in the front. And the feeling that the interior gives you already here from the first seating test is that BMW and Mercedes feels a little bit more voluminous in the interior, where this one here is sleeker, cleaner. This is, however, nothing with just good or bad. It is indeed a personal preference, so you should also compare our other videos then from the 5 Series and the Mercedes E-Class. This is the interior overview, and definitely a wow effect. You know, I'm not too happy with the shiny black materials right there because they collect fingerprints and also scratches. Well, maybe you should just leave it then and always clean it, then it looks also fancy. And I think they have found a very cool way here for this matte aluminum style. Also, just listen to it. Very haptical, interesting also. The experience. Everything is streamlined. It has some Porsche style definitely with this strong wrapping right there. Then again, this compact steering wheel, good control. And the base setup will be analog instruments on the left. Optional, you can see here 12.3-inch digital cockpit. Soon more details to that. The base setup here would be 8-inch in the top. And this one, the lower 8.6-inch, always stays the same. And then optional, as we show you right here, 10.1-inch, together with the MMI Navigation Plus, that you get all the fancy, for example, also the satellite view. We'll soon dig deeper into the details of those screens right there. But let's just finish the base one. Here again with the single frame grille style, I think again picking up the exterior details. And then the lower part with the big classic middle console. Here, by the way, with the S-tronic automatic transmission. So this is then a dual clutch transmission. And in the lower part, you just don't have so many buttons anymore. Start, stop, and then a camera button, for example, to check out this really superb camera system with a great resolution. And then just a volume button left that you can still manually control it. Digital instruments right there. I think they are best in class at the moment. You can also check out how fancy this full view of the map looks like, but you can also get other information in there, for example, and also radio info, consumption info, and so on. You're pretty flexible, and it definitely has a wow effect, but you can still get those analog instruments if you like. And you can control those digital instruments on the left side. You zoom in and out on the map, for example, change the view, or go back, or then change in the menu right there. And this is a clear view of the head-up display. It can also show more information, as I've already shown you with this nighttime feature. Infotainment details. Interesting is that when you swipe in this menu and you press a button, for example, you also get a clicking sound and somewhat a haptical feedback, although it's just a screen. It looks great in this glass view, and look how fast it is with this new CPU unit they're using. So pretty impressive for sure. And when you want to enter an address, then you can also play together with the lower screen, because then you can either use the voice input, for example, but you can also put just the letters right there, or then use a writing function. This is actually quite handy when you then can enter it in this way. Other than that, both screens are a little bit separated. For example, here in the top, you can also change the settings and radio, and also get the Apple CarPlay connection, for example, or you can still remain with your classic Bluetooth connection. And one very interesting feature of this camera, I want to show you the 3D view. This is an imaginary picture of all the surround cameras. This one then is just a 3D projection basically, but from all those pictures of the cameras, an image is being formed. And then you can, for example, check, am I really damaging my alloys right and left? This is of course a very, very impressive thing. Wow, this is really wow, wow, wow. But you have to take some time to control all of this, so you shouldn't do that while driving faster. And taking a look at the lower screen in detail, here you can control the climate ones. I still prefer to have real knobs, because it's super fancy. Also gives you this haptical feedback. It looks superb. You can control where the vents are coming from right there, but while driving it is definitely distracting. You cannot control it while driving without being distracted, and I think that's really dangerous. In the lower part, you also have a drive select, for example, to pick the dynamic and sport mode and something like that. Soon more to that while we drive the car. Again, it looks great. I have great ideas here, but while driving, I think you need some voice control or something. And I haven't managed to control the vent structure here, for example, where it's coming from via voice control. However, what you can do with the voice control to make it a little bit simpler and safer is, for example, adjust the temperature. So now says, what can I do for you? Change the temperature to 23 degrees.
I'll increase the temperature to 23 degrees.
Nice. So it's also 23 degrees now. Or you can also, for example, say, I am cold.
What temperature should I set for you?
19 degrees.
I'll lower the temperature to 19 degrees.
Actually, the car should have said now, wait a minute, you first say I'm cold and then 19 degrees, I won't do that. That would be, appropriate answer of the vehicle. But, with changing the vent, for example, I've tried it, I can try it once more. Please change the vent.
Could you say that?
Okay.
You can operate.
That's not really
I'll be.
Oh, whoa. So in some of the situations you're really a little bit overwhelmed. Then some features are popping up, but the ones that are really working properly, that is then totally fine. So I think it's already a step in the right direction. we have to see how that one plays out. Of course, it also helps really when searching for a destination or something. Drive me to Berlin.
I'm looking for destinations for you. Please wait a moment.
Yeah, so
Please
now
follow.
Berlin appears here and I can just click it and go there. So that's also comes really handy. Adaptive cup holders in the front here, very well done. I like those. Those are my favorite airbags here, basically. Then room to put your key. Then electric handbrake here, very sleek design as well. Then this armrest, you can slide it forward a little bit, fixedly attached. Superb build quality, the best you can find. And then you can flip it up and have 2 more USB supplies. Inductive charging platform. Again, this almost nothing comes with standard equipment. You have to pay that extra. And of course, you can also put your phone right there. It does fit also. Sitting in the rear, yes, you have 1 centimeter longer legroom than in the previous generation, so it's a little bit more spacious. And you also have enough knee room here, even if the tall driver is sitting in the front. However, with those big luxury sedans, you always have the problem that the package, so considering the length on the exterior and the room you get on the interior, is really, really bad. So they are not using the length they have, but you still have enough room because the car is so super long. Headroom wise is also totally fine. Good result, also better as for the A7, because there the roofline falls a little bit more. And when you go for the estate version here of the A6, it goes all the way like this, so you have more room than for your head, but this one here is actually really enough already. You feel a little bit cramped as you are in this lying seating position. You also cannot really change the position. So I can just stress again, for me the times of the luxury sedans are over for rear seat chauffeuring. Yes, they look very classy on the exterior, have this classic approach, but if you want the most luxury experience in the rear, rather go for an SUV, because then you have an upright seating position also in the rear. And you can flip those seats from here. Takes a little bit of effort. This is a 1/3, 2/3 split from the general setup here. When you lift the head restraints, you can also get the rear bench here a little bit flatter like this, that you have a transition. And you also have an armrest right there, like this, with cup holders, adaptive, and some room right there. And then you can also just flip the middle part as a ski hatch and load through longer things. And then you can get 2 USB supplies for the rear, the 12-volt power supply, and optional is 4-zone climate control, where you can control the temperature in the rear, even with the haptic feedback and the clicking sound. So this is really nicely done, but of course, again, a costly extra. So let's open this trunk hatch, and it opens basically automatically, but it's not an electric system, so you have to close it quite firmly that it really closes. So, and then you have 530 liters, quite square dimensions for a luxury sedan. So it is somehow very well used, but of course the building form itself is limiting very much. So the estate is the way to go then if you want it more versatile. A net can be equipped right there to keep things held tight. Underneath that you have some sound equipment, great sound by the way from this optional sound system. Then when you put the cabin trolley inside, that you can check the dimensions. It's really long, that's for sure, but the height is limited. And then let's flip those seats. Let's check how that one plays out. This one then is the 1/3. You can, as I said earlier, also have just this ski hatch in the middle here. Hey guys. And then finally the last one, and this one then is the maximum setup you have. Here on the left side, by the way, when push all the way down, this is the difference when those head restraints are not put higher. Let's start the driving part, aka Thomas's driving lounge. And interesting, we have the dynamic all-wheel steering here. That means the tires on the rear axle can also move. And when we are going slowly, especially up to 5% across, you can really see it at the rear tire there, how they move, a little bit left or a little bit right. It's really interesting to see, and accounts for minus 1.1 meter turning circle of this vehicle when you're driving slowly. And also the car feels more agile, especially when driving at slower speeds. When you are at higher speeds, then it's not about the turning agility, it's more about the stability, and that is then up to 2% in the same direction steering like the front wheels. That's the difference. And so it is a costful option, but it is one that you should be going for if you have enough money and if you want to have an option which, you know, really gives you some technology advantage, because it makes the car indeed feel more agile. Also when I'm turning now in those very tight corners, which is really fun to do, although the car is big. So usually I would say, you know, a car of that size is, you know, at some point on some tight roads not so much fun to drive, but this all-wheel steering really accounts for it, that, you know, it fakes a shorter wheelbase. This is the driving feeling you get from this then. So this is pretty cool. As I said earlier, we also have the adaptive air suspension built in here. It is, you know, when you want to save money, you can stay with the base suspension. It will do fine. But if you're, wow, cool. This is a great view here on the River Douro. That ultimately ends in Porto, in Portugal. So if you have the money, you should get the air suspension, because it gives you this flying carpet riding comfort. Also, the non-air suspensions are really good at Audi, so you shouldn't be afraid to get also the base one. But then again, if you have a good budget for that, leasing or buying wise, the air suspension will give you more comfort and also more flexibility, because at lower speeds I can, you know, have the best comfort. It really feels like the car would be literally flying on the road. This is pretty cool. And at higher speeds then I can still get some more stability, because I can also pick it in the drive select. You know, I can remain in auto mode, dynamic mode, comfort, efficiency, or individual, and I can also raise or lower the car. So if I'm facing some bumps or maybe going slightly off-road, I can put the car a little bit higher, and that's pretty cool. In the auto mode, the car decides itself what it's going to do with the dual clutch transmission, automatic gearbox. You can always use the shifting pedals here. It goes into manual mode. You can shift up again or hold the pedal to go back to the D mode. Besides the driving modes, you can also pull on the shifting lever, then you get in this S mode, but this just for shifting. The gears are turned up higher, shifting later, and shifting down earlier again. This is automatically happening when you go to the dynamic mode of the vehicle, and I can do it right now as well. So when I'm in this dynamic mode, I can also see that the suspension is going down. I have more contact to the road, car feels stiffer, the steering gets a little bit more precise and, you know, a little bit more resistance from it, and the gears are then automatically in this S mode, and it gets some more boost from the engine then as well. So that air suspension really makes you very flexible. And for example, the sport mode is good, that you can do some overtaking maneuver here quite quickly. Thank you so much, that was really nice. So you can get more power from that engine without, you know, shifting down. But then again, you can also just stay in the normal driving mode and use the pedals right there. And here again, those corners are actually for a big luxury sedan rather tight, but then again, this great suspension together with the progressive steering they've worked on, this was one of the factors they've improved now. So you see, I can keep my hands on the steering wheel all the time. I don't have to steer much. So the angle of the corner is pretty much like the angle of the steering wheel. And that to me is one of the most important factors when driving the car. And that is one thing I feel sometimes that is lacking, especially in base Mercedes models, if you compare them to that. Maybe it gives you a little bit more natural steering wheel feeling, because some criticize with Audi that it would be too artificial. But then again, at Mercedes you have to steer much more. So with the base Mercedes E-Class, for example, I wouldn't really have fun here in those corners. I would have to steer, you know, maybe this angle more each corner to the right and the left. With the BMW, they have something in between. They give you a very natural steering feeling, but you don't have to turn that much like with Mercedes. So it's really like, from step to step how those three premium manufacturers behave also in steering wise. It's also very interesting finding when you really drive all three direct competitors. So let's see if we can overtake this truck then in front of us. And this also accounts for the feeling that this car doesn't feel too big. It is really big, but for example also the E-Class and the BMW 5 Series, they feel bigger when driving. I mean, they use a lot of aluminum here also to keep the weight down. Here we go. And how effortless this vehicle does that. Wow, that's really cool. Here also in the corner, good contact to the road again, good feedback from the car. So aluminum, for example, used at the hood, at the doors to keep the weight down. But nowadays, BMW 7 Series and 5 Series, they introduced this also a lot of aluminum loose used. The 7 Series even carbon fiber. So they, a lot of years, Audi was the only aluminum low weight car in this segment. Now others have catch up there as well. So yes, it is a relaxed feeling and it is also a sporty feeling, and we're not in the S6 or something. So this is still somewhat the base model with this petrol engine, and I don't have the feeling it should be any sportier. So with, for example, the Mercedes E-Class, you have the base E-Class, which is pretty lax luxury-wise, so not sporty at all. And then you gotta get a E43 to get it sporty. And with BMW and Audi both, they are also the base models drive pretty funny and sporty. Well, they don't drive funny, they drive in a fun way, or in a fun sporty way. That's more precise. So that's about steering the car yourself. However, if you think about upper mid-size segment, which is this one here, and mid-size segment, which would be A4, C-Class, and BMW 3 Series, those mid-size cars, of course, give you more driving fun because they do feel lighter. So at some point, whoa, that's a bump. But for such a fierce bump, the suspension still handled that very well, I have to say. So if you go for the mid-size segment, you have more driving fun, the car feels lighter. You can't deny physics, then at some point this weight does play a role for sure. And getting back to the aspect when I want to change the temperature, yeah, I can, but I always have to look, or you have to do trial and error. So temperature you can set with the voice command, but sometimes I don't feel like talking to the car all the time. Maybe if I enter a destination mode, like drive me to Barcelona or whatever. But then I'm somehow missing those turning knobs, Or maybe it has to be somewhere where you can click it a little bit easier. So that's one downside of this infotainment system for sure. Other than that, you can also at daytime very clearly read what's happening in those, on those three displays. That's pretty cool. And again, I'm driving those bending corners here all the time, and I'm not getting any fatigue, for example. And sometimes with bigger cars, you say, great luxury, awesome vehicle, but getting a little bit too stressful in winding corners. And here it's actually no problem. Those 20-inch rims, by the way, you get some more comfort if you go a little bit smaller. They're still somewhat okay, especially in combination with the air suspension. But if you do not pick the air suspension, do yourself the favor and get some more comfort by not going 20-inch rims. Maybe go, 17 could look a little bit small for people who really love to check the relation of rims and cars. 18 or 19 would be my tip for you to go for. That's, I think, a good compromise between looks and then also the driving comfort, because the bigger the rim, the less the comfort, the more the sporty feeling, yes, but the bumps are more transported than to the car because you have less tire area left. So I think driving-wise from the whole setup, they've done a really great job. So as for consumption, you know, as I told you earlier, you're all using this mild hybrid technology. So when I'm, for example, going to this efficiency mode, I'm boosting that even more. So for example, now when I'm going off the throttle and the car's just rolling, then, you know, there's hardly any resistance for the engine. The rolling effect of the car is being used, and depending on, you know, let's see if it maybe also has to do with the AC. Sometimes it can be, you know, depending on how much consumers you have in the car, like those electric consumers. So for example, yesterday I was also on the motorway, and then I was seeing how the RPMs dropped to 0, especially in the efficiency mode. And then the car was really fully sailing and basically not using any fuel. And so on motorway with constant speed and stuff, I could get this car to about 9 liters on 100 kilometers. And that is actually pretty decent consumption for such a big vehicle. Of course, you can get that higher when you have this agile ride here, for example. Here now, you know, in those bending corners, acceleration, braking, we are here about 13.5 liters on 100 kilometers. For the MPG, just Google 13 liter or 13L/100 km in MPG for the, you know, the performance consumption, and for the minimum consumption then 9L/100 km in MPG. So yes, you can drive it fuel consuming, but then again, you see when you push it, it goes really way up high. And so this sailing coasting function with the 48 volt board net mild hybrid technology is something that works when you really plan it and use it in the most efficient way, and on paper, in the laboratory basically, and on the motorway. That is then somehow working, but other than that, yeah, you know, not really always. Those cobblestones area here, wow. The air suspension is also evening that out very, very well. That's pretty fancy, really cool. So the good thing to me is that you can still drive this car on your own. It's not only an autonomous driving machine, although it is surely capable of doing so. You know, we have the autonomous emergency brake, which is starting from standard equipment, most important feature. Then optional blind spot monitor. This area here is flashing when someone is overtaking you. This is the most important assistance system option. Third most important is the adaptive cruise control, which is really giving you a comfort feature. Also now in different trims available. They put it together in some assistance systems packages. And then you can get this, for example, a tour package and so on. And the ACC also available then with a traffic jam assistant that you can basically let the car drive and don't do anything yourself at very low speeds. That's very comfortable. And then everything else is of course nice to have, let's take it that way. In corners like those here, where you have a lot of fun driving, you don't want too much to do with it. But when you're on the motorway, for example, that's pretty cool when you can also have this steering assist. The car could theoretically drive on its own, but after a while it says, please put your hands on the steering wheel. But you can feel definitely that the car is steering yourself, and I found this system a better approach than Mercedes does, because with Mercedes we recently experienced in the A-Class and in the G-Class that those corrections when you were going, you know, closer to the lines were done by the brakes, and then you're suddenly like, bam! Not with the steering wheel, but just, oh my god, everyone is now shaking in the car, because the car is then reducing speed at the inside wheels to get the car off on the road again. Here, it's just slightly done with the steering correction by the car itself. That's a smoother transition. However, I always turn it off here with the button, with this column here. I always turn it off basically when I want to steer myself, because you get a very loose steering feel when you have it activated and you're still steering actively yourself. It's good when you want to relax on the motorway, keep your hands on the steering wheel, and then let the car basically do its own job with you a little bit, surveying it. And of course, we always have to be aware of what's really happening. But pretty impressive, definitely how all the systems are working, all the radar systems that are built in here in this car, and also safety-wise, and that you get then also the warning when you set the turning indicator and want to overtake. For example, the 3D camera systems we've shown you earlier and stuff. So that's that's also putting input then in this CPU unit called ZFES, developed by NVIDIA, and it's really a driving computer basically in this car. Of course, at some point you can say over-engineered, but as I've driven the A8, the A7 and the A6 now, you're getting used to it a little bit. So as I was first driving the A8 and for the very first time, and it was like, oh wow, that's really, it's too much at once. But then you're getting used to it, and then it's also quite okay. But then again, you also do not have to order every option they have available, because this is also one of the biggest downside of this car. It can get so extremely expensive, and the extra price policy is sometimes, I will really have to say pathetic, because you have to pay for everything extra, and sometimes also extremely high prices just for some very, very small things. So maybe if they are a little bit more successful, they could also give something back to the customer there and include some more features then as an advantage. I think a lot of people would be glad for that, and maybe also honor that then. So I'm still not getting any fatigue here. That's pretty cool. So also long-term comfort with those sport seats are given. By the way, I said earlier, base seat, sport seat, super sport seat, multi-contour seat. The super sport seat is not out yet, it will come later, and then you also see the differentiation to this normal sport seat here and the super sport seat, that it has the integrated head restraint. This one here has a separated head restraint, but I recommend you to stick with those sport seats here, because the super sport seats will have less room to move around, and you will not use this car on the racetrack. So this sport seat here gives you a good compromise between a little bit more shoulder support. So here I'm being kept tight in those corners, don't slide around too much. Also good that I have the Alcantara. If you would here then again have the full animal skin seat, I would slide around all the time. That's also one thing you have to keep in mind. Even if you don't care about the animals, it's better to be kept tight a little bit more in the seat, especially in those bending turns. So overall, I think also satisfied with those sport seats. At some point I would of course be interested also in the base seats. I'm always very interested in how cars really look like in the base variant. Unfortunately, we do not always have the chance to do so, because the manufacturers always wants to present everything they have, that no journalist later says, wait a minute, that's in the infotainment system is too small. Yeah, because maybe there's a bigger one optional, so they put everything they have in there that no one can complain. And so I also can have a very differentiated opinion about those manual seats. As I said earlier, I like it when not everything is electric. However, electric seats, I found them quite cool, but then the important information is they are not missing in this vehicle. It's just an option again to have electric seats. And you just have to know that and then decide if it's really important to you, if you want to pay that money for this kind of stuff. Yeah, so pretty impressive, and I think the driving part is definitely the one where this car here can score one of the best results, besides the consumption again, but that's also pretty common in the segment here. However, I'm really astonished that the difference between the minimum and the maximum consumption is really high. That's quite often with very small turbo engines, but I'm really surprised that we also have that here with a very big vehicle with big displacement still, 3-liter V6. Usually they are not that sensitive in the differentiation or in the difference between the minimum and the maximum consumption. So again, 9 liters minimum, 13 something more maximum, and the realistic everyday driving figure will usually be then somewhere in between, so around 11, which then would be somewhat okay. And then the question if that one justifies the extra price for the diesel, that really depends on how many kilometers a year you are driving. And of course I want to show you some motorway driving. At the moment I'm in the dynamic mode, so I can also show you some more of the acceleration and also about sound insulation and some of the assistant systems. So let's go down here. Soon there will also be more speed allowed. As soon as we approach the next one. Here I can also activate the adaptive cruise control. The distance to the car in front of me is being kept. As you can see, the car is not breaking down. And also reacting on the speed limits. So now it was 40 kilometers an hour and the adaptive cruise control reads the traffic signs. You can get this trim of the ACC, but you do not have to, so you can pick that one. But if you have it, then it's always there. And now let's accelerate. Let's do some 70 to 120 kilometers. That was already 125. So you can see really good performance here from the 3-liter V6. The sound is not too loud, so it's rather subtle. And I mean, if you're driving an A6, you also do not want to show off. So I think that's also a perfectly fine decision-wise then. So now the cruise control, you can set it here at the column next to the steering wheel. And I also have the possibility then to deactivate or activate the lane guidance. So if I want to drive a little bit sporty or maybe just do the acceleration and braking part with the ACC but steer my own, that's fine. But I can also activate it, and then the car is really helping me to keep the lane. So this is not a system where you should take your hands off the steering wheel, just I'm demonstrating you that the car is being kept in the lane, and that works very accurately. So now it's already warning me, please take over the steering wheel. I get a small warning sign. So that goes quite quickly then, that you have to take over. So usually you keep hands at the steering wheel, and now I get some help from the steering that I'm being kept in the lane. And as I said earlier, when I'm really actively steering myself, especially on winding motorway roads, it's somehow better to deactivate it. If it's more running straight and it's getting rather boring, then it can be also relaxing to have it activated. But all of those systems are really working pretty flawlessly, so that's really cool. Sound insulation wise, you hear nothing. So the sound insulation is definitely on a top-notch level. There is this optional sound insulation package, so the base one is already good. Then you can always put it on the next level and even increase the noise insulation, which is the case with this vehicle here. And when you're driving about 120 kilometers an hour, so over 60 miles an hour, 60, 70 miles an hour, you hear nothing. It would be almost like standing still. So the only wind sounds you probably hear is when you have turned the AC up in a level 4 vent or level 5 or something. But that's basically it. And this is definitely very impressive. However, all of the competitors, they managed to do that very well. I think Mercedes with the E-Class is at the moment leading in the respect of the noise insulation. So the E-Class to me was the most silent one. And sound system wise, this Bang & Olufsen sound system here, I've seen it earlier with this pretty spectacular popping up effect when the speaker in the front there goes up. It's really a very decent sound. I think the 3D surround in the Mercedes E-Class is in this case also a little notch better. So it's really interesting how of those three premium manufacturers, I've mentioned so many different elements now. You know, in this field Audi is a little bit better, in that field Mercedes is a little bit better, in that field BMW is a little bit better, and it's really more about which one of those special features is the most important to you, and then it could be your final choice of, you know, which one to go for those. So pretty relaxing ride here on the motorway, definitely a great autobahn vehicle. And if you're driving the estate or the sedan, it will not matter really very much driving wise. Of course, at a later stage we'll also take another in-depth look at the estate, which is especially popular in Germany because Germans like to load stuff then in those estate wagon trunks and right there. And yeah, I have to say, you know, you always have the possibility to throw a bicycle in there, which is not possible in the sedan here. But driving wise, there's usually not much of a difference, you know, how they really behave, or if they're sportier or something. Weight wise, it's also not much of a difference. So that's usually the same then. So I can really enjoy this autobahn ride, and this car is basically autonomous ready, but the regulations have to come first for that. And we've also seen recently that there are also some accidents when people trust too much in autonomous drive systems. So I think it will take some more years until we have this transition phase finished for that. So what do you think about this tech fest here today in the vehicle? And now to our conclusion for today with the all-new Audi A6. Well, if you compare it to the A7 and the A8, yes, the A7 is the sportier approach, the A8 is the long approach, the big luxury chauffeur approach. This one here, the very classic approach, as I've told you, and it is rather an evolution in design, so nothing super spectacular, but it is very sharply designed. And there will of course also be the estate if you want to have some more room on the interior. The interior is so precise, they have perfection in detail. The infotainment system, yeah, I think among the three German premium manufacturers, I think it is the best solution. However, you can always say that's maybe a little bit over-engineered, and they have to try to find some more solutions that it's easier to control, although you have so many controls available. Also good that we have Alcantara seats available even here in the high luxury segment. Driving wise, it was very, very good, I can tell you, daytime and nighttime. So this car here, already in the base version, really masters the compromise between sportiness and the luxury comfort very well, and to me even a little bit more than its premium competitors. So overall, if you ask me, the initial question, is it at the moment best in segment? I would say yes, on a very high level, because all three cars, the Mercedes E-Class and the BMW 5 Series and here the Audi A6, they are all really superb cars. Of course, the overall concept is rather conservative and old school, but if you compare them then on a very high level, I think now with the new generation here, Audi leads it by a little bit in those different chapters I have presented you. Or what do you think after watching all three of our reviews? We also have a couple of videos from the BMW 5 Series and the Mercedes E-Class in different versions. Make sure to check them out as well, and also see you next time at Autogefuehl.